Welcome to the Freight Agent Insider Podcast, hosted by Levi Van Pay.
And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to Freight Agent Insider. I'm your host, LVP, the host with the most. Actually, with those initials, probably more like the least. I don't know. As a reminder to all, please like, subscribe, find us on Spotify, YouTube, and TikTok. New show every Monday, 9 a.m. Central Time. Every episode is going to feature a different freight agent. And actually, this is going to be a unique episode because we are here with Brian Leadingham of Lone Cypress Logistics. It's a brokerage. Brian, how are you today?
Good, Levi. How are you?
I'm very good, man. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Brian, we'll dive right into it, man. This is obviously more of a unique episode, being that Lone Cypress is it's a brokerage unto itself versus an agency. How did you end up here, man? How did you find your way onto the helm as owner of a brokerage?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of a different path that a lot of people take that end up in the brokerage industry. Myself and one of the partners here at Lone Cypress Logistics, we actually work in the produce industry for growers and shippers for a little over a decade. And then we saw a need for a brokerage, for brokers that understand the produce language, right? And understand the pain points and the hardships of what those people go through every day sitting in those seats and what the growers have to invest and how important it is to them. So we decided to start Lone Cypress Logistics about 3 years ago. At first, it was just my partner, Jason, here and an assistant. We did that for about a year on purpose, kind of established some credit and some with some of the factoring companies and things like that. The second year of the company, we grew a little bit myself, and then we brought on another broker. And here we are a little over 3 years, and now there's 12 employees and now 4 different states and 2 countries technically. So
that is awesome, man. And congratulations on year 3. I mean, I know especially in this market, there's a lot of brokerages kind of floundering, going the opposite direction, but it sounds like Lone Cypress is doing excellent right now, especially in a challenging niche like produce.
Yeah. And I think that's one of our strengths really is that, when we started this, we found a niche, right? Instead of just going out there and maybe doing some heavy machinery equipment or, non-reefer stuff, flatbeds, things like that. We really kind of tried to dial in on what we know and what we understand. And like I said, I think our customer base really appreciates the fact that we speak their language, right? So just like, the freight brokers all have their, language and terms and acronyms and things like that. So when we talk to, the transportation team, there are times where they can just put us in touch with the sales guy there, and we can have a really quick conversation and almost cut out some of the back and forth because of that niche background that we have, and kind of started by design, really.
So, Brian, Lone Cypress, being that it is more geared towards produce, do you guys shy away from, you mentioned like heavy haul or big machinery stuff? Do you guys stay away from other niches, or are you willing to kind of expand those verticals as well?
It's funny you brought that up. Actually, we're starting a heavy haul section of Lone Cypress this month, really. So no, we're not shying away from those kind of things. I think we want to get a better understanding of what we're getting into before we just hop into any industry. For example, right now we'd stay away from like hazardous material, right? We just don't have the knowledge to take that on right now. So I think it's important to know what you don't know, when you jump into these certain areas. Because like I said before, I mean, as you're talking to these customers, like I don't know the acronyms and the language that would go into like a hazmat situation, They'll ask me, do you have an ABC license, whatever, I have no idea what they're talking about. And it'll be written all over my face. It's hard to guess your way through something like that. So
yeah, oh yeah, and that's actually one of my my go-to phrases is say yes and figure it out later. But maybe when it comes to those particular things, not good advice.
No, I mean, we definitely do some of that here too. But just like I said, for those initial meetings, versus some people that have been maybe doing it for 20 years, they'll be able to tell that you're brand new to this. And so we find it's probably hard to break through into those industries, being so green when there's people with like a larger base knowledge behind it.
Brian, backtracking slightly on the topic of produce, because it's a very interesting niche in that claims are extremely high typically in certain areas of produce. Is there ways that you and the team at Lone Cypress mitigate that to try to stay clear of that? Obviously, claims can be a killer for any brokerage.
Definitely. And like you said, sometimes in produce, it's a wide range, right? I mean, you can have a full load of, say, potatoes and onions and have it be $16,000, or you can have full loads of like berries or avocados at certain times of the year, and it can be over $100,000. And with those berries, especially, they're so perishable, right? You get a little bit outside of the proper temp range, and it really does make a difference upon arrival. And so, some of the things that we've done to help mitigate, you're always taking a risk, right? At the end of the day, no matter what. But some of the things we do to help mitigate that risk is we'll have drivers take pictures of the set points before they leave, pulp temps of the product before they leave. So we make sure it's cooled down properly to the proper temperature before we load it on our trucks. And then inside of that, even like our carrier base too, like we use Carrier 411 to vet all of our carriers. My carrier packets is another tool that we use to help vet carriers. And then really what we've learned to do too is we don't start you off on a berry load, right? If this is the first time we're going to work with you with a carrier, we put them on a lower value load to start, test them out, see how they do. And then if they do well, if they track like they're supposed to, if they kind of check all the boxes, then we'll maybe kind of start building up our volume with them, and then maybe start moving them to some of the more high value loads that we have.
I've actually, I've never heard of brokers going about it like that, but I guess the name of the game here really is building trust with your carriers. And it sounds like you guys are doing exactly that. Brian, you gave two really solid tips there on the tools that you're using. I've heard it a lot. We do the same thing. We are set up with Carrier 411 and My Carrier Packet. Is there anything else, I guess I'll ask, that you do on top of that in terms of vetting for your carriers? Because I know you mentioned you're a non-asset brokerage.
So like I said, so we use My Carrier Packets, we use Carrier 411, and to us, those tools are invaluable. But the last thing that we always do too is kind of the gut check. Sometimes you can be scrambling last minute, trying to cover a load that your customer gave you, at the end of a Friday, right? It's a Friday afternoon at 3:00. He said this picks up in 4 hours. So sometimes you got to hit the boards. We try to not do that as much as possible. But sometimes it's inevitable, right? You have to post a load on the load board. So there are times where if it doesn't quite feel right, we don't do it. So if there might be a freight guard on there, if the emails don't match up, if a phone number doesn't quite match up, if there's just something inside of you as you're going through these tools, and if you're trying to convince yourself that this carrier is going to be okay for this load, it's probably not the right call. And that's happened just multiple times where it comes down to it's a hard decision, really, at the end of the day sometimes, because you want to service your customer as best as you can and help them out and prove that you're the kind of brokerage that can help them out in a bad spot versus potentially some other guys who said, no, we can't cover this. But at the end of the day, the value of the product, you really have to think about that goes on there, and like your own personal liability with that product and your service level to your customer. Because at the end of the day, if there's a temp claim on there because, the carrier didn't write it correctly, or it was a day late or something like that, not only is it potentially fines depending on who the receiver is for your customer, but also it's lost sales for that receiver, right? So it's kind of a double whammy as far as your customer looks at it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think you kind of hit on this as well, but if you are a newer broker, for example, and maybe you've got an opportunity at a spot load, it needs to be moved right now. And all you can find is a carrier with a very new MC. Maybe there is a freight guard, maybe there's something else. What is your advice for getting that load moved, but A, not killing the relationship with the shipper, and B, not doing something that might end up very bad situation with said carrier?
I mean, usually it kind of comes down to dollars and cents, right? So as you're pulling up some truck off the load board, sometimes you just have to raise the price, get a better carrier, and potentially lose on that load, right? I like to tell customers, actually when I was on the produce side and now that I'm on the freight side, look, we're not going to get rich or broke off of one PO or one load, right? So it's about the long-term relationship and, helping out, that customer in a time of need. So, as a young broker, even if you have to take a 5, 6, 7, the market could take off $1,000 loss on one load. That's where you have to decide, as a broker, is this customer worth it, right? Do I feel like they're just trying to use me for this one spot load and there's no real growth potential here with them? But if there is, then you have to ask yourself, okay, this is a kind of opportunity for me to prove myself and to hopefully get more from this customer. So, to be willing to take that loss on that one load in order to cover it with the kind of carrier that you feel you can trust.
So it comes down to making a business decision.
100%. And sometimes, in my experience, sometimes it makes sense to, and sometimes it does not.
That's right.
But
That's
every
right.
business is different and every customer is a little different.
On the topic of newer brokers, individuals that are new to the game, I get a question quite often, not often, I guess, but once in a while I get the question of, why should I give you, Levi, with Select Transport, why should I give you guys 25, 30% of my business when I can just open my own brokerage? And before the show, Brian, I said this to you. I said, if you want to do that, go for it. You should go all in. But I think it sounds a little bit better than it actually is. It's not easy, is what I'm saying. What are some of the challenges that you and the team starting out at Lone Cypress ran into building a brokerage from scratch? Was there ever a question mark of, hey, maybe we should just create an agency versus a brokerage? And in the end, what is the difference between the two?
I mean, as someone who sit here and has done it, I'm the same way. When people ask, like, should I do this? Yeah, go for it, man. If you feel confident and you're the position in your life where you can take that risk right now, yeah, go for it. But, as when we created Lone Cypress Logistics, we had a pretty well thought out plan. One of our partners had a background in logistics, was a CFO at a different logistics company. So we sat down, made the plan, but I'm sure, as you know too, every plan, there's going to be bumps in the road, right? You can't plan for everything. So, and as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the reasons why we didn't grow in the first year by design, is because of some of the hardships that we ran into. And one of the ones that we really didn't see coming is factoring companies. So you can you can have great relationships with carriers, right? From your time at somewhere else, or maybe you just know carriers from, like I said, from working in produce. We knew some of them. But those companies are forced to work with factoring companies as an overall arching company policy, right? And so as a brand new business, we don't have the credit, to prove that, we're going to be around in 6 to 9 months. And so some of these factoring companies either won't work with you because you're not a year old yet and you don't have a year's worth of financials to provide them. Others will give you a minimal amount of credit, potentially, say like $10,000, $15,000. But if you're doing cross-country loads, that's 2 loads. Yeah, so
right.
It's difficult to scale with a customer when you can only do 2 loads, before you have to pay it off on your
There better be some very important loads.
Exactly. So and just even some of the insurances too. So I would say that's some of the things that we necessarily didn't, we knew were coming, but we didn't really understand truly how difficult it was to get around those barriers. And so a couple of tips, things that we did to help get around those, especially the factoring companies. You could potentially have another broker or like even some carriers, if you have a good enough relationship, basically vouch for you. Um, Come and say, hey, I trust these guys. They're going to be around. And they kind of have to even sometimes stick their neck out and assign a dollar amount that they're willing to trust. To say, hey, we'll cover X amount, but we have to run, everything through the factoring company. And so that's one thing that we did. But like I said, it really comes down to your relationships, at the end of the day, for us at least, right? Everybody has a different path. Everyone has a different story. But for us, that was really how we got around some of those factoring issues in the early stages.
So don't let the factoring or the age of the MC stop you if you are out there listening and you want to start your own brokerage. Be prepared for more of a potential upfront cost or upfront investment, perhaps. When you're starting any business, you're going to have that involved. Brian, is there anything on the side of factoring that would require when you're starting a brokerage, monetarily wise, that you'd have to invest if you are looking to start a brokerage?
I mean, there's your initial startup costs as far as the
Yep.
factoring goes, or as far as just overall.
I would say maybe both.
Factoring companies, not quite so much. I mean, obviously, if you can self bankroll some of that stuff, with the factoring companies, it obviously
Yeah.
it helps, right?
Yeah.
If you have the cash on hand to show the factoring companies, hey, this is how much we have. I don't have a year's worth of financials, but I can share bank, statements, things like that with you to help show that we're solvent. As far as the overall startup cost to go get your own MC and DOT number and all that stuff, it's fairly minimal. So, and I say these things too, not to discourage anybody from doing it. It's obviously we're here.
Yeah. Right.
So there's plenty of people going out there and doing this like you, but I bring it up just to make people aware of some of the bumps in the road, or that you might run into as you're starting your own MC. But like I said, I definitely encourage anybody who's thinking about it and feels confident to go out there and do your homework first. Don't jump in blind, but do your homework and go out there and do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to kind of contrast maybe the agent side or the agent model versus starting a brokerage, just for anybody who is interested in one versus the other, listen, what it all comes down to in the end is customer relationships. If you don't have customer relationships, you're not making any money. So on the agent side, you are going to be able to build a business in a similar way without a lot of the backbone that is set up that Brian is talking about, creating the MC and building the factoring relationships. The agent side is basically piggybacking off of something that's already set up.
Yeah. Now I would add one more thing too with that agent model as well. If I would also try to take into consideration non-competes, really, at the end of the day.
What about non-solicits?
Yeah, they're a little different. But I only bring that up too because, if you spend 8 years somewhere building up this book of business, as an agent model, and then you decide that, you're ready to go ahead and take that leap to the brokerage side of things, sometimes that non-compete can stand in the way of doing something like that. But like I said, inside of that agent model, really what I think the main difference is between the two, it's a risk and, somewhat of a time commitment, right? One thing that I didn't really know was going to be so time consuming is running the business side of the business, right? So it's the payroll, it's the balancing the books, it's, managing the insurance plans for the employees, the 401, everything that comes with the business side of the business.
That's right.
It's also very time consuming and at times can be very stressful as well.
We've had some brokerages over the years that take exactly what you just said and say, I don't want to worry about this anymore. I want to become an agent because of those things. on the flip side of that coin, we've also, personally, I've seen agents where they are creating an MC, they're an agent, and they're just kind of building that MC simultaneously, biding their time as an agent to eventually slide over to their own brokerage. It's all about what you want. If you're, like you're saying, Brian, I think if you're prepared for the accounting, the insurance side of it, managing all of those different things, operating a brokerage might be more for you. If you don't want to worry about back office, you just want the support team to handle the invoicing, AR, AP, the billing, all those things. The agent model might be more for you, where you can just kind of focus on your customer relationships, slinging more freight.
100%. And like I said, it's different models for different people and what they want out of their work life differently. And so I think it's great that both exist, because there is definitely a need for both. And I really wouldn't say one's better than the other. It just comes down to the individual and what they want to do with their career.
That's a really good way to put it, Brian. We will transition now to I'm excited to hear about this from you. Some pitfalls and horror stories. And the reason I'm excited for this from you, Brian, is because you guys focus heavily on produce. I'm sure there are many pitfalls and or horror stories that you and the Lone Cypress team may have had to kind of traverse. Is there anything that you can, and it doesn't have to be produce, of course, but is there anything that you can point to, especially with starting such a large operation yourselves, things that others potentially could avoid or learn from you?
I mean, I think it's a good start. Trying to decide if I want to go with the horror story first, or I'll give you one real quick. And it wasn't that too traumatic, but this is just some of the things that pop up, especially in produce and the perishability of the nature of it. We had a load one time. It was a holiday weekend. It was a load of asparagus, and typically you put airbags on the side so it doesn't tip, because the boxes are waxed. And so the shipper didn't have any airbags. We didn't find out until after it was loaded. And then we're trying to get a hold of the customer at the time. Well, it was Memorial Day weekend. Well, he's on a boat in the lake all weekend, so we can't get a hold of him. So we're trying to get it restacked at a place, but technically we don't have approval to get it restacked and the airbags. Yeah. And he comes back on Monday. He's like, "Oh, sorry, bro, I didn't know." Yeah. So I mean, like I said, there's so many things in this industry that like you don't even think about until you really,
it's too late.
Yeah, till it pops up, right?
Right.
And like I said, that's why we touched on it a little bit earlier. We try to do as many things as we can to prevent issues, right? But at the end of the day, you can't prevent everything. You're gonna have problems that pop up, and you learn from them too. That's the thing. I mean, now we make sure that the driver takes pictures before he takes off of the airbags, and we will not load them now without them on the side. There are definitely things like that pop up sometimes, but like I said, we love what we do. Like I said, we grew up in produce. We love produce, and the freight side of things is a blast too.
Okay, man, that was not too scary. Do you have any maybe pitfalls to avoid for others? Doesn't have to be related to starting a brokerage. Maybe it's even just in terms of something related to like produce customers, finding produce customers or produce customers maybe to even avoid if you're on the newer end of the brokering side, because like we were kind of talking about earlier, there are some types of fruits, vegetables, whatever it is, that are more perishable than others.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you brought up right there. I didn't even think about that till you mentioned it, but you're right. Not every customer is a good customer, right? And so it's building that relationships with them. And one way that I think you can kind of avoid falling into those, like learning the hard way, right? Like finding out that, maybe sometimes when you're prospecting new customers and, it happens really quickly and it seems easy and you're really excited, like, I got this new customer, maybe go slow with them at first. Maybe there's a reason why they're always looking for new, agents or brokers. And
right.
And another thing you can do is, especially in your niche industry, ask around. ask your other customers, ask other brokers. We're pretty transparent if somebody comes and asks us, like, hey, do you have any history working with company A? We'll tell you. Like, we're not going to go out there and just freely give out this information, right? Because we could have had a different experience than somebody else. But if somebody comes and asks me, we're not going to lie to them. Or, at times we'll just say, you know what, we did, but we no longer work with them, and just kind of leave it at that, and hope, they can read between the lines. But yeah, definitely do your homework. I know in the produce industry, we have a tool called Blue Book.
Blue Book.
Blue Book, yeah. And so it'll give you a credit rating, days to pay, kind of a loose financial status of the company. And then they'll also work as a claims mitigator as well, if you're a member. So if both parties are members and say, like I said, we had some tip pallets, they're saying it's our fault, we say it's their fault, you bring that claim to Blue Book, they're very cut and dry. They take a look at the situation and they go, okay, you're 70% liable, you're 30% liable, or 50-50 or 100-0, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and everybody in the industry really kind of, whatever Blue Book says, that's what it is, for the most part. It doesn't continue after that, because they have a great reputation in the produce industry. So like I said, I'm not familiar if there's other programs like that or companies in other industries, but in the produce world, that's kind of what we use.
For those that don't know, and this would be new to me, as far as some high claim produce items out there, are there different things that you could point to, maybe for newer brokers, to avoid?
I would stay away from potentially, like you said, the higher dollar, the more perishable things like strawberries. Basically, the berry category as a whole is higher risk. Cherries is definitely one that you don't want to touch.
Really?
Especially if you're starting out. Yeah. Cherries during the California, Washington season, they can get pretty pricey up there, and they're very perishable. Where I would recommend people to look to start is categories like citrus, potentially avocados, depending on how the market is. Avocados are tricky because if you're shipping ones that aren't staged, like just green rocks,
right,
pretty low risk.
Right.
But come Super Bowl time, what they do is they'll age the avocado prior to arrival, because everyone's going to make guacamole for the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
So the retail stores want avocados ready to go. So they'll age them, get them ripened, and then you're shipping ripened avocados. So if you have a breakdown, a delay, or anything like that, and you miss that Super Bowl window, or it's continuing to age in your truck, that could be a problem. So like I said, at times avocados are great, for newer brokers, but potatoes, onions, anything really, as a consumer that you think is a hardier item, you're probably right. Obviously, inside of every commodity, it's going to have its challenges. But like I said, especially potatoes, onions, things like that, the value is going to be a little bit on the lower side.
Yeah.
Traditionally. So you're taking less risk as a cargo goes. Yeah.
Brian, drop your best tip. Don't give away the farm, obviously, here, but your best tip for landing a produce customer.
Good question. I think the size, if you're going out, especially as a newer broker, the size of that produce company, I would really look into beforehand. It's going to be difficult to get in with the larger companies, the guys who are doing, over $1 billion a year in sales. But some of the smaller, newer guys who are maybe developing their transportation department and their operations, right? So if you get in early with maybe a smaller to middle-sized grower, you can really build that relationship and then hopefully scale with them over the years, right? So you were there from the beginning. So where a lot of the more seasoned companies, the guys, like I said, who look really attractive because of their volume, right? It's like, they do hundreds of loads a week. You go, and, as a broker, you go, yeah, that's the guy I want to get in with right there. All this big volume stuff. Well, they've been around forever. So they have their guys, they have asset base, non-asset base broker. It's a lot more difficult to get in with some of the larger guys right away than maybe potentially some of the smaller produce companies. And then like a tip, like I would say, it's just, again, do your research before you call people, right? Learn a little bit about the industry, learn about the commodity, the seasonality of the commodity. So, for example, let's say that I said don't do blueberries, but it's so nomadic. So let's say it's blueberries, right? Uh, part of the year, half the year, they come out of South America. So don't call a blueberry grower in Oregon asking, do you have any blueberry loads, when they're not even, going to have anything for another 5 months. You can call, introduce yourself and say, hey, I know you guys don't have anything. Your season, probably starts in, month this and ends here. That sounds so. Before you call and approach them, or, go to a produce show and try to approach them, get some key companies you want to target and learn about what they do. I mean, and so you can sound knowledgeable, like, when you approach them.
Another kind of to piggyback off of that, another quick tip. Again, guys, if you're not following our TikTok page, I'm dropping the juice there. But you can, in your Google console, you can set up alerts for within a specified area of new shipping facilities that are being set up. So if there is something that is created, you'll get an alert to that. And then, kind of like Brian is saying, potentially get in on the ground floor, or if the shipper is on the younger side, kind of be first to move some of their freight.
I've heard about that. Actually, one of our business development guys here was telling me about that the other day. But no, I personally have not tried it yet. But
if there's anybody, yeah, if anyone wants to give it a try, let us know how it works. I've heard some pretty good things about that if you're looking for some new customers. Brian, we will transition into our very last segment here. We'll do a little bit of trivia with you. I hope you are ready, because these questions are going to come in hot. These are directly from ChatGPT, so a lot of the answers don't make a whole lot of sense. Do your very best, though. I should have put some produce questions together for you, but I didn't have time. Whenever you're ready, man, we will get this thing started.
You fire away. See how I do.
Let's do it. All right, man. I think the record it's just 1 minute. I think the record is 6 correct answers. So let's see if you can beat it.
Okay.
All right. Question 1. What's a common packaging material?
Plastic.
That's correct. What's the term for return shipping?
Don't know.
Reverse logistics, if you've ever heard of that. What's a major freight rail gauge?
Man, you're killing me.
We'll skip that one. I don't know it either. What's a broker's carrier contact?
That's just the point of contact for that broker.
Grok says dispatcher. ChatGPT.
Yeah.
What's a key freight security measure?
Freight security measure. I should have watched more Jeopardy as a kid. That clock gets you. Key freight security measure. Dude, I don't know.
Seals.
Oh,
what's a common freight surcharge?
All this stuff sounds so familiar with what you said. Fuel charge, lumper fee. Yeah. Dude, I cannot believe I didn't say. You know how many seals I've had on trucks?
I was gonna say, man, I would think that would be a pretty common one for you, but like you said, it's that clock.
I've never heard somebody word it that way, right? It's not like
ChatGPT doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, when you call up somebody, go, hey, did you put on that top security measure on the back of your truck?
No, you did a great job, man. Brian, is there any tips? Is there any last second things that you want to throw out there? It doesn't have to be a tip. It could just be kind of anything that you want to be heard.
I think, so we touched on this a couple times. For anybody out there that's looking to get into the freight world, I highly recommend it. But like I said, it's important to know what you're getting into beforehand and really decide if that agent model or the broker model is right for you. Like I said, there's pros and cons to both. We went the broker route, but like I said, I have friends that are on the agent side. We have agents that come here, to Lone Cypress, and they go, I never want to start my own brokerage, right? I want to be an agent for my whole career. So really, like I said, do your homework, figure out what you want, and go after it. Because it is a really rewarding industry when you're able to help your customers, and you move, everything across the country and, sometimes in other countries, and build those relationships. I mean, I've met people in this industry that I'll be friends with for the rest of my life. And those are the kinds of things that I love, because no day is the same out here. Like I always said, I tell our CFO here, it's like, man, I'd rather dig ditches than be an accountant. Like I couldn't do it. I just can't have that kind of every day is, very, very similar in my life. So, yeah, like I said, if this is an industry you think about getting into, I highly recommend getting into it.
Beautifully put. Before we hopped on, I told you kind of the rationale behind this podcast was I spent a lot of money on college, and had I known about logistics beforehand, I probably would have saved that money and made just as much money as I'm making now. So just maybe gives people another opportunity. Brian, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's been a blast.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.